Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hari Om. Good afternoon. So we are now today going to start the second section of Bhagavad Gita. Coincidentally, we also going to start the second year of our Bhagavad Gita satsang. So thank you to all of you for making this happen. We started on 28th of March last year, and congratulations to all of you. Thank you, and a special thank you to Sarika for the excellent rendition of the shlokas, the verses, and also special thanks to Upasana, who helps with compiling the videos and so that I can share them with you. So congratulations, thank you. A good milestone indeed to start our learning about the nature of Bhagwan. So with that, let's get started with this.
सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावतीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। गीता ध्यानम्। ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणी भगवती अष्टादशाध्यायिनी अम्ब त्वामनुसन्ततामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणी। नमोऽस्तुते व्यासविशालबुद्धे लारविन्दाय तपत्रनेत्रा येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवैत्रेयपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषत्सु गावो दुग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सस्तुतिर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्। भीष्मद्रोणतथा जयद्रथजला गान्धारनीलोत्पला शल्यग्राहवती कृतेन वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सोत्तीर्णा खलु पाण्डवैरननति कैवर्तककेशवः पाराशर्यवचः गीतार्थभटम् नानाज्ञानकपीसरं हरिकथा सम्बोधनाभूदितम्। लोके सज्जनषट्पदैरहरः पीपीयमानं मुदा भूयाद् भारत पंकजम् कलिमल प्रध्वंसिन श्रेयसे मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयति गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम् यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैः स्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदे गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततत्पतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तं न विदुर्सुरासुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः
Hari Om. So we all know that the Bhagavad Gita has 3 sections, as it is called in or termed in Sanskrit, Kandatrayam. The section 1 is from chapter 1 to 6. And in that, along with describing karma, Bhagavan gives clarity on the nature of the self or Atman. This is termed as Atma Swarupa. The section 2, which is chapters 7 to 12, even as it details out Upasana or devotion, it gives clarity on the nature of God, nature of Ishvara, Bhagavat Swarupam or Ishvara Swarupam. And section 3, which is from chapter 13 to 18, it gives details on jnana, knowledge, and as it does, also gives clarity on the nature of non-duality. For some, this is one nature with Bhagavan or Advaita. For others, it is of similar nature with Bhagavan, that is Vishishtadvaita. And as I have said multiple times, it is not in our space to debate which is the right path and all. Let us follow the spiritual path and we will get to the right path. We have completed section 1. So by now, all of us should have a reasonable, good understanding of the Atman or the self. And in section 1, action is taken up for studying. And along with that, the renunciation of action is detailed out. It is explored. Action is usually taken up or undertaken for fulfillment of desires which are selfish. And how does one change the very nature of action from that which is for fulfillment of selfish desires to a selfless action? By devoting the action or by performing the action to a higher ideal, to Bhagavan. And that we saw is Ishvara Arpana Buddhi and Prasada Buddhi. When you arpan it, when you do it for Bhagavan or the higher ideal, and when you receive whatever comes as a prasada with equanimity, as the benevolence of the higher ideal, as his benevolence. And this way of doing yoga, which is termed as karma yoga, leads to chitta shuddhi or the purity of the mind. Chitta shuddhi is required, is necessary to assimilate knowledge and derive the benefit out of that knowledge. Without chitta shuddhi, knowledge will remain information and will not serve the purpose that it is intended to serve. When the mind is pure, the Shadrupus that we saw, the 6 impurities of the mind, which cause disturbed mind, which cause disturbance in the mind, they are not there. And that then leads to Chitta Ekagrata. Chitta Ekagrata means the single pointedness of the mind. Ekagrata is pointedness, single pointedness. Agrata is pointedness. And the mind becomes single pointed, focusing on one single thought. And Chitta Shuddhi helps with Shravana and Manana. Chitta Ekagrata helps with Nididhyasana and Samadhi. The pure mind, which came from Karma Yoga, is now concentrated, focused. The Karma Kanda, among other aspects, enables Chitta Shuddhi. And the Upasana Kanda, which starts from chapter 7 up to chapter 14, among other aspects, gives Chitta Ekagrata. The generic translation of Upasana, now we are getting into the Upasana Kanda. The generic translation of Upasana is devotion, also contemplation. Contemplation in the self and devotion to the higher ideal, to Bhagavan. The literal meaning of Upasana is sitting near. Upa is near, asana is seating or sitting. And who does one normally sit near to? You sit near to a person who you love. So the aspect of love for Ishvara is brought in this section. One of the aspects or one of the elements of Ishvara is manifesting as consciousness. Pure consciousness, which is called Chaitanyam, and manifesting in the realm of the world or samsara as Chaitanyam, and then exhibiting itself in this realm. And how does it exhibit itself? There are 5 elements in this. The first one is Swatantra Chaitanyam. The pure consciousness is an independent entity that is all pervading. The second one is Ananta Chaitanyam. It is limitless, endless, not limited by space, not bound by space. The third aspect is Nitya Chaitanyam. It is eternal, permanent. It is not limited by time, not bound by time. There is no beginning and an end. Then the fourth aspect is Atma Chaitanyam. It has no form, no shape, no size. It is formless. And finally, Brahma Chaitanyam. It permeates everything as in Swatantra Chaitanyam, and it also transcends everything. That is Brahma Chaitanya. And while the Chaitanyam or consciousness itself is changeless, it changes everything else. It gives the body the faculty of perception and action. Consciousness gives the mind the faculty of emotion and feeling. And it gives the intellect the faculty of thinking and discrimination. So it's like a light bulb. To give you an analogy, let's take a light bulb. The light bulb has 3 aspects to it. One is the glass bulb. Then there is that element in it. And then is the gas, which is inside the bulb, which is vacuumed inside the bulb. By itself, this body, these 3 things put together, is inert. It doesn't do anything. It just lies out there. But once you infuse electricity into it, light manifests. It glows. Similarly, the body, the mind, and the intellect, by itself, we call it a dead body. Even though up to a point in time, there is mind and intellect in the dead body. It is inert. But when consciousness infuses itself into the body, mind, and intellect, life manifests. And that is the jiva aspect of the life. While the jiva is influenced, it is affected, it is afflicted by the 3 gunas that we talked about earlier also. And we will talk again in future too, in Bhagavad Gita. Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. So while the jiva is influenced, affected, afflicted by Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva, the Ishvara is pure Sattva, or of a nature of pure Sattva. And the expressions of the Ishvara are also very, very different. And this is what we will see in this section. Let us see how Bhagavan describes all of this. But to begin with, let us take a step back and go to the last verse of the previous chapter, which is chapter 6. If you recollect, when we completed chapter 6 revision, we did not touch upon the last 2 verses. That is because it is very closely linked to the current section. Let us now do verse 47 of chapter 6.
Yoginamapi sarvesham madgatenantaratmana.
Yoginamapi sarvesham madgatenantaratmana.
श्रद्धावान् भजते यो मां समे युक्ततमो मतः
श्रद्धावान् भजते यो मां समे युक्ततमो मतः. In the previous verse 46, before this was verse 47 of chapter 6. In the previous verse, Bhagavan had encouraged Arjuna to be a yogi. And he had said that the yogi is superior. Superior to who? Superior to a tapasvi, that is an ascetic. Superior to a jnani, the learned person. And also superior to the karmi, one who performs actions. Here, Bhagavan says that among all the yogis, so the yogi is superior to amongst all the others, but even among all the yogis, the supreme are those whose innermost self is fixed in me. Yoginam api sarvesham, the supreme, the most superior among the yogis, madgatenantaratmana, whose innermost self, antaratmana, is fixed in me. Madgatena. How they are able to place their hearts in me and their minds are single pointed, chitta ekagrata, on me. And how do they do that? Shraddhavan bhajate yoman. With utmost devotion, Shraddhavan, they worship me. Bhajate, worship you, mom. So Bhagavan knows that two questions are going to arise once he has said this verse in the last chapter. And those two questions are what? Bhagavan says, Madgatena. He actually plants the seed. Like we saw that in chapter 2, he plants the seed for all the aspects that he's going to cover in the upcoming chapters, chapter 3 onwards. Similarly, in the last verse, he plants the seed for the second section. So when he says Madgatena, fixed in me, so he's planting the seed for the question, who is this me? When you say Madgatena, fixed in me, who is this me? What is the nature of this me, the nature of God? And then he says Shraddhavan bhajate, worship with utmost devotion. So there, how do I do devotion? How do I become devoted? What is the right way for devotion? So that is why section 2 is about Bhagavan, the nature of Ishvara, and about devotion. And he plants the seed for this in the last verse of the previous chapter. So with this verse, Bhagavan is actually connecting the two sections. Section 1, which was about karma, jnana, and dhyana, meditation, in section 1. Now Bhagavan is going to bring up bhakti. So with this verse, he connects the two. The nature of the Lord now, which is connected to the previous aspect of the nature of the self. Karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga. And this is now going to evolve into bhakti yoga. So we start with that. We start chapter 7 of Srimad Bhagavad Gita.
Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Adha Saptamodhyayah Jnana Vijnana Yogaha.
Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Atha Saptamodhyayah Jnana Vijnana Yogaha.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha.
Maya Saktamana Partha.
Maya Saktamana Partha.
Yogam Yunjanmadashrayah.
Yogam Yunjanmadashrayah.
Asamshayam Samagram Mam.
Asamshayam Samagram Mam.
Yadajñāsyasi Tatshrunu.
Yatājñāsyasi tatshrunu.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha. Maya Saktamana Partha. Yogam Yunjanmadashrayah. Asamshayam Samagram Mam. Yadajñāsyasi Tatshrunu.
O Partha, says Bhagavan, right? O Partha, whenever he uses the term of endearment, he says, Maya asakta manaha, asakta manaha, Maya in me, with fixed mind, asakta manaha. When the mind is fixed on one aspect completely, it gets attached to that aspect. Attachment to one precludes other thoughts. So it eliminates everything else that is there in the mind. See, the first time, serials became extremely popular. We were all kids at that time. Serials became rage in India, and that was a huge wave. It started off with, people of my generation and older than me will know. Others, younger, Sarika, Amrita, you guys also may have heard. Bunyad was one. Then Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi. Then we had Mahabharata, Ramayana. Chitrahar, of course, was the only thing where people probably switched off their TVs was something called Krishi Darshan. So it was an absolute rage. People used to be completely engrossed in it. And once, there was this huge, in Delhi, we were kids in Delhi, and there was this kind of a shockwave, which was that while the family was completely engrossed, asakta manaha, in what? In Kabhi Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi, a robber came and cleaned up the entire house except where the TV was. Everything, this is a real story, it happened. Everything else in the house was cleaned up, but no one even realized because the focus was so intense. Everything was precluded. Nothing you could get to know what was going on. Asakta manaha. And madashraya, taking refuge in me. Ashraya means something that we hold high. We put on a pedestal so that we can look up to it. That is ashraya. So Bhagavan says, madashraya, take refuge in me. So to give you another example, my mother, she struggles a lot with her knee, but she also manages to, kind of balance out various activities quite well. So once we were in Tirumalai for, Seva and Darshan and all that, and she was in full flow, basically racing from one altar to the other, complete flow. And then my son, who was observing, he was quite young at that time. This I'm talking about maybe 15 years ago, maybe a little bit more. He was quite young at that time. He says, look at Dadima, she doesn't feel any knee pain when it concerns Perumal. So Madashraya, by the way, my son himself, he is devoted to soccer, always has been and he was. And when the European League used to play all night, one match after the other, sometimes there were like 3 matches during the night, during our night. And the next day's exam, these typically used to happen just before the final examinations, just before summer. And where he used to take refuge throughout the night, exam or no exam. So, madashraya and asakta manaha. So, we know very well, we are well aware what fixing the mind means and what taking refuge means. It happens in our day-to-day life. On who or on what? Here, Bhagavan says the power that enables everything that we witness in this samsara, in this world. The glory, the beauty, that is beyond comprehension. So Stephen Hawking, the skeptic scientist, okay, once again, I go back to him. I love reading up whatever he used to say because fantastic science and at the same time a non-believer. He has said, and I quote, that the laws of nature acting on mass and energy started a process that eventually created us. We have this one life to appreciate the grand design of the universe. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. So Mom, me, the universe, the grand designer, that me, fixing the mind on that grand designer, fixing the mind or taking refuge in that grand designer. And do what? Yogam yunjam. Thus, in this manner, practicing yoga in harmony with that single thought, having taken refuge. And Bhagavan says that when you do that, yatha jnasyasi mam. How would you come to know me if you do this kind of a yoga? In what manner would you come to know me? He says, asamshayam and samagram. Those are the two words he uses. Asamshayam means without doubt. Samagram means completely, wholly, fully. So with the heart, one comes to know completely. With the brain, one comes to know doubtlessly. And these two lead to devotion. And Bhagavan says, Tat Shrinu. Listen to that. How you can come to know me completely and fully. Let us all listen. Go to the next verse.
Jnanam teham savijnanam.
Jnanam teham savijnanam.
Idam vakshyamya sheshataha.
Idam vakshyamya sheshataha.
Yajñātvā neha bhūyonyata.
Yajñātvā neha bhūyonyat.
Jnātavyam avashishyate.
Jnātavyam avashishyate.
Jnanam teham savijnanam. Idam vakshyamya sheshataha. Yajñātvā neha bhūyonyata. Jnātavyam avashishyate.
So Bhagavan says, idam. Idam is this. This that I am going to teach you now. Jnanam, knowledge, savijnanam, and wisdom. So we have seen this a couple of times in the past also. Knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is paroksha jnana and wisdom is aparoksha jnana. I'm sure we have all done revision also, okay? So there's no excuse for not remembering. The former is derived through sight and the latter comes from insight. And Bhagavan says that he is going to give us the knowledge and also enable it to become experiential wisdom for us. And then he says, Vakshyamya sheshataha teham. So I shall declare completely to you. So there are two major things that prevent knowledge from becoming wisdom. One is sandeha or sanshaya. That means doubt. So doubt puts knowledge to sleep or it burns the knowledge, completely burns it away. It makes it useless. So doubt can make knowledge dormant or it burns it away. And the other element that prevents knowledge from converting into wisdom is viparita bhavana. Viparita bhavana is a notion that is contrary to what you know, to that knowledge. Contrary notion. Meaning that you know the knowledge is there, intellectual clarity is there. But in addition to intellectual clarity, intellectual contradiction is also there. So this leads to non-abidance. Even though you know, you say, I don't believe. Lack of belief and non-abidance. And this, when Bhagavan says, I shall teach to you completely, this completeness in Bhagavan's statement ensures that both of these are going to be addressed. Both the aspect of doubt and the aspect of contrary notion, he will address for us. And Bhagavan gives an assurance. How does he give an? He says, Yagyatva neha bhuyonyatu jnanatau yama vashishyate. So Bhagavan says, having known this, there is nothing else that ought to be known or remains to be known in this life. What I will teach you completely, having known that, there is nothing else that ought to be known. What must be known, without which living the life optimally will not be possible. And what remains to be known. You will have a well-rounded, complete knowledge come wisdom, both the theoretical aspect and the practical aspect. Like we say in Gita Dhyanam, Sri Gita Dhyanam, Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogda Gopala Nandanaha. See, what there we are saying is that Bhagavan Sri Krishna, Gopala, Sarvopanishado Gavo, all the Upanishads are the cows of knowledge. They store the knowledge as cow stores milk. And he himself, Bhagavan himself, nourishes the Upanishads, nourishes the cows of knowledge, and he milks the knowledge for us and makes it experiential. That Sri Krishna, that Gopala, that son of Nanda, he becomes a cowherd so that we all can learn. That is the beauty of that verse. And this is where it is connected. Bhagavan will milk that knowledge completely for us. And then he continues in verse 3.
Manushyanam sahasreshu
Manushyanam sahasreshu
kaschid yatati siddhaye
kaschid yatati siddhaye
yatatamapi siddhanam kaschin mam veti tattvataha
kaschin mam veti tattvataha
Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye yatatamapi siddhanam kaschin mam veti tattvataha.
Sahasreshu manushyanam. Sahasreshu means among thousands. Manushyanam, of human beings. Among thousands of human beings, kaschid yetati, one person strives. Kaschid, one person strives, is yetati. For what? Siddhaye, for perfection. So Bhagavan is saying this. Among thousands of human beings, one strives for perfection. And then, among the ones who are striving, yatatam api, among the ones who are striving, among the siddhanam, the ones who are successful in striving, not only among the ones who are striving, the ones who are successful, among that one that is successful in striving, he says, kaschin mam veti tattvataha. One person among those knows me in essence. Tattvataha means in essence. So among thousands and thousands of human beings, one person strives for perfection. And even among those successful in striving, one person knows me in essence. So actually for us, reaching this stage in satsang itself is a great example of striving. We have completed 1 year. We have completed the first section of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Fantastic example of striving. So like I said in the beginning, congratulations to all of us. Let us now listen to how and what Bhagavan shares about himself. And we must listen with what? We must listen with Asakta Manaha, and we must listen with Madashraya. That is very, very important. So Bhagavan is addressing human beings among all elements of creatures or creations. See, he's saying Manushyanam. He's not saying Jantunam. Why is that? Because the Manushya, the human being, among all creatures, only the human being has the capacity to attain this realization. All creatures are essentially Bhogayonis. Bhogayonis are those that are born for Bhoga, for enjoyment, or for survival, one of the two. Only the human is a Yoga Yoni, born for yoga. And if we choose, then we can perform that yoga. We can also become Bhoga Yoni. It's our choice. And our choice is enabled by what? The mind and the intellect. So if we choose, we can be Yoga Yonis. And that is why Bhagavan says, Manushyana. The human mind intellect is able to experience sufficient sorrow. And that sorrow gives us the capacity for dispassion. And the human mind intellect is also able to experience enough joy that then creates the balance, the samatvam. So it is the wonder of this human mind intellect. Like one of the previous satsang, I gave the example of a dog show. I can take my pet to a dog show and my pet will win the dog show, will be standing on the first pedestal of the 3 pedestals. You know, you've seen those athletics tracks, right? 1, 2, 3. So my Simba, my dog, is standing on that number 1 and wagging tail, looking very happy. But if you look around, every dog, those who are not in the pedestal are also wagging the tail and looking very happy. It is the human intellect. The dog doesn't know what's going on, what is this show, what have I won. It is a human intellect that derives the joy out of all this. And if you don't win, it is the human intellect that is able to also balance out the sorrow. So this aspect, that is what enables, because of this dispassion, because of this joy, the human embodiment is the only one that can have punya and papa. Remember what we said, punya and papa earlier? Papas are the disturbance that get created in our mind because of our own inherent tendencies, vasanas, and also because of the karma. The human being not only can have the punya and papa, also has the capability to understand there is punya and papa and do something about it. So one aspect is to know that there is punya and papa. The other aspect is to understand and do something about it. Making the human being the only among creatures to have purushartha or human goals. We covered this in the introductory section. And these goals help us what? Help us reach Mars, at least for now remotely. And also help us reach the depths of our own self, our own within us, to explore our pure consciousness. Now, talking of Mars, this NASA's rover that was launched recently, Perseverance. I'm telling you every aspect of this Perseverance thing. Those of you who have not had the time to look into it, please do it. It's beautiful. And I'll give you maybe an interesting prelude. So Perseverance is a robotic astrobiology lab, which is packed inside a space capsule. I mean, just look at it. Oh, wow. It's like that. I mean, as children, when we went to this biology lab, did we ever think that there would be a lab, astrobiology lab, sitting somewhere on the red planet that we have studied in science? So it's a lab. It's actually a laboratory that is packed inside a space capsule. Human achievement at its pinnacle. So when it hit the final stretch of its 7-month-long, it took 7 months. When it hit the final stretch of its 7-month-long journey from Earth to Mars, it emitted a radio signal telling the managers on planet Earth in Los Angeles that, hey, I'm going to enter the atmosphere of Mars. And it streaked into the Martian atmosphere. And we know, we have seen space shuttles, burn up, at entry into the Earth atmosphere. The Martian atmosphere is much thinner, much more thinner than the Earth's atmosphere. By the time the signal reaches the mission managers, or reached, it's already done, right? The signal reached the mission managers, Perseverance had landed in the planet and intact in one piece. The signal had to cover 204 million kilometers. And it took 11 minutes to reach planet Earth. Perseverance from the top or edge of the Martian atmosphere took 7 minutes to touch down on the crater at which it was supposed to. In fact, one of the toughest aspects was that it had to land in the crater. Not only did it have to land, it had to land in a very uneven crater, simply because based on previous tests, it was felt that that is the portion of Mars which will give us the maximum input in terms of microscience into determining and doing studies and scientific analysis. So 7 minutes it took. Now this aspect was a major worry for the managers, because this was the most challenging aspect. What if it burns? What if it crashes? What if it breaks at landing? So on and so forth. So the engineers actually affectionately called it 7 minutes of terror. And guess what? $2.7 billion. That is the spent on this project. So obviously, if it went wrong, you're burning. Like knowledge gets burnt, with doubt. That's it. $2.7 billion would have got burnt. So perseverance is actually expected to set the stage for scientists to conclusively show whether life existed beyond planet Earth. But remember, it is within the scope of our solar system. They are still not going beyond our solar system. For all you know, there is another sun with another system where life exists. We don't know. We have not yet endeavored to that extent. So within the scope, within the boundaries of our solar system, whether there is life or not, they are hoping to conclusively show. And I'm quoting Dr. Swati Mohan. She says, success will hinge on a multitude of complex events unfolding without a hitch. Perseverance would have to do a lot of this on her own. We won't be able to guide it. And Swati Mohan is the head of guidance, navigation, and control operations of the laboratory. I forgot to note down the name, which is the control center for Perseverance, the project. Now, Bhagavan has set the stage. For what? For us to conclusively know about him in essence. Tattvataha, in essence. Let us see if we can be that one among thousands and thousands. Just like Perseverance, we are on our own. But unlike Perseverance, Bhagavan is there too. We are lucky to have his guidance. Because in that especially in that last 7 minutes of landing, before landing, there was nobody who could do anything, in spite of this humongous achievement that human science has made. Perseverance was on its own. And continuing, there will be a lot of situations where Perseverance will be on her own, like Dr. Swati Mohan says. We are on our own. Among the thousands, that one person, obviously everybody is on his or her own. But we have this guidance. That is why we are fortunate. The guidance of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Let's go to verse 4.
Bhumirapo nalo vayuhu
Bhumirapo nalo vayuhu
kammano buddhirevacha
Khammano buddhirevacha
ahankara iti yamme
Ahankara iti yamme
Bhinna prakritirashtada
Inna prakritirashtada
Bhumirapo nalo vayuhu kammano buddhirevasha ahankara iti yamme bhinna prakritirashtada.
So Bhagavan says Bhumi, earth, Apaha, water, Nalo, fire, Vayuhu, air, Kham, space, Manaha, mind, Buddhi, intellect, Evacha, and even Ahankara, egoism. All these, Bhagavan says, all these, Ahankara, egoism, he's talking about the individuality among all beings, that sense of individuality. He says, these are my varied eightfold nature. Bhinna, varied. Ashtada, eightfold. Prakriti. Prakriti, we have always seen earlier also, is nature. So Bhagavan explains in this and in the following verse, which we'll come to in a bit, the constituents of matter and spirit. Once a person understands the distinction between these two, which two, matter and spirit, and understand it clearly, they come to understand that the spirit identifying with the matter is the cause for all disturbances, the papa, when that identification is there. And the spirit disassociating or not identifying with matter, rediscovering itself, without this identification. Rediscovering itself meaning finding the essential wisdom. That essential aspect of the self, which is perfect, which is nothing but absolute bliss, that is recognized by this person who is able to do that. So Bhagavan says, but before we go there, one of the scientific explanations for this, for creation, to kind of just set the context here, it all starts with Maya, Prakriti. And from Prakriti comes Mahat or Buddhi. There are various ways to explain creation. This is one of them. And from Mahat and Buddhi comes Ahankara. Ahankara, the sense of individuality, the egoism. All of these, Prakriti, Mahat or Buddhi, and Ahankara, all of these are threefold in nature. What are those? Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Now from Sattva Ahankara comes the 5 Jnanendriyas. From Rajas Ahankara comes the 5 Karmendriyas. And from the Tamas Ahankara comes the 5 Tanmatras. We will just come to those in a minute. From the Ahankara also comes the Manas. And the Manas, from the Ahankara means from the Sattva Ahankara and the Rajasic Ahankara comes the Manas. And Manas controls the 5 Jnanendriyas and the 5 Karmendriyas. And from the Tanmatras comes the Pancha Mahabhuta. Bhagavan just referred to the Pancha Mahabhuta. So the faculties of sight, the faculties, by the way, not the eyes, ears, the faculty of sight, the faculty of sound, the faculty of smell, the faculty of taste, and the faculty of touch. These are the Jnanendriyas, and they come from Sattva Ahankara. The faculties of grasping, the faculties of locomotion, faculty of speech, the faculty of excretion, and the faculty of reproduction are the Karmendriyas, and they come from the Rajas Ahankara. All elements in their subtle form are the Tanmatras. They come from Tamas. Subtle form means elements in the gross form are always an admixture. Like they say the chemical formula for sugar or the chemical formula for water, right? It's an admixture of multiple elements, admixture of other forms. Elements in their pure form are Tanmatra, in the absolute pure form. Bhagavan will talk about this a little later. Manas, as we saw, comes from Sattva and Rajas and controls the Jnanendriya and the Karmendriya. And from the Tanmatra comes what? The Akasha or space, also known as ether, the Vayu or air, the Agni or fire, the Jala or water, and the Prithvi or earth. And Bhagavan says, in this way, my varied nature, my eightfold varied nature. And when he is talking about this eightfold, he is referring to the manifold. If you observe this again, maybe once you get my notes, you can go through it. Of course, you can Google all of this anytime. There are 24 aspects or elements there. Prakriti, Mahat or Buddhi, Ahankara, and then the 5 Jnanendriyas that make it 8, the 5 Karmendriyas that make it 13, the 5 Tanmatras that make it 18, Manas 19, and the 5 Pancha Mahabhutas that make it 24. So when Bhagavan says eightfold, all the 24 gets encapsulated in that eightfold. And he continues in verse 5.
Apareyam mitastvanyam.
Apareyam mitastvanyam.
Prakritim vidhi me param.
Prakritim vidhi me param.
Jiva bhutam mahabaho.
Jiva bhutam mahabaho.
Yayedam dharyate jagat.
Yayedam dharyate jagat.
अपरेयमितस्त्वन्यां प्रकृतिं विद्धि मे परां जीवभूतां महाबाहो ययेदं धार्यते जगत्.
Evam apara means this is apara. What is apara? What just Bhagavan talked about? The 24, the varied eightfold aspect, or the 24 aspects of his nature. This is apara. Apara means what? Apara means something that is not para. Para means higher. So apara means lower. It is also called jada or inert. So Bhagavan says, me alone. It is me. All that is also me, but my lower expression, the lower expression of my nature. All of this 24 elements that he talked about. From kinetic energy to black hole. All of these fall under the realm of the inert, apara. And Bhagavan says, itaha, other than, tu anyam. Tu anyam, other than, but completely different. Other than these 24, other than these 8 manifold aspects, but completely different from them, totally contrasting from them. Other than the apara, he says, Vidhi me param, know my higher prakritim, nature. So, and what is this higher nature? Bhagavan goes on to explain, Jiva Bhutam. Jiva Bhutam, that which manifests as life. The very life element. That which is the nature of consciousness. Yayedam, through which, by which, what? Jagat dharayate. This world is upheld. And when Bhagavan says this world, he is referring to both the manifest and the unmanifest, all the elements of apara. So that life element, because of which, that consciousness, because of which the entire world is upheld. That is my higher nature, Paraprakriti, the higher nature. And more of this Bhagavan will cover in chapters 13 and 15. So thus, what Bhagavan is starting to explain his nature in chapter 7. And how does he do it? He explains it in a twofold manner, Aparaprakriti and Paraprakriti. He says, I have one nature which is manifold. Jada, it is inert, it is manifest and unmanifest, it is lower. And he says, this is Aparaprakriti. And he says, I have another nature, which is unitary, single, which is the nature of the consciousness. And this is Paraprakriti. And he says that the latter upholds the former. The truth upholds the appearance. The real upholds the apparent. And once the para is known, the apara is subsumed. The unseen, the seen, the seer, each and all of them is Bhagavan. In this way, please know me, O Mahabaho, O mighty armed, he tells Arjuna. Now, before I finish for today, I cannot help but going again, drawing a corollary or linkage with science and Stephen Hawking. So he says, who says Stephen Hawking here? He says, and I quote, he says, the universe was once very small, smaller than a proton. So the universe, as we know, came out of the Big Bang. So it was even smaller than a proton. Actually, in the black hole, there is nothing, not even a proton. So the universe, and I quote, the universe was once very small, smaller than the proton itself. This means something quite remarkable. It means that the universe itself, in all its mind-boggling vastness and complexity, could simply have popped into existence without violating the laws of nature. Do we need a God to make the Big Bang bang? No. Science has a more compelling explanation than a divine creator. This is made possible because of the principle of cause and effect. Something that happens must be caused by something else that occurred earlier in time. And I unquote. So Bhagavan is saying here that both the cause and the effect are upheld by consciousness. And both the cause, the effect, and the consciousness, cause and effect at one end, and the consciousness at the higher end, are his nature. And Bhagavan will continue to say that both these aspects of his nature is the cause for all beings. That we will see in the next satsang. I was planning to cover 6 also today, but I think it is better connected with the following verses. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much. Hari Om. We will do our invocation prayers. Repeat the all verses we did today.
Okay. Starting from last verse of chapter 6. Okay. Yoginamapi sarvesham madgadenantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam sameyuktatamu mataha. Shri Bhagavanuvacha Maya Sattamana Partha Yogam Yunjanmadashrayaha Asamshayam Samagram Mam Yatadnyasyasi Tatshunu Jnanam Teham Savijnanam Idam Vakshyamya Sheshataha Yajñātvā neha bhūto yat Jnātavyamavashishyate Manushyanam sahasreshu Kaschit yadati siddhaye Yadadamapi siddhanam Kaschinmam veti tattvataha Bhumirapo nalo vayuhu Kam mano buddhi vivacha Ahankara iti yamine Bhinna prakritirashtada Apareyamitasvanyam Prakritim viddhi me param Jiva bhutam mahabaho Yayidam dharyati jagat Om Asato ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om.
So there's a question here. Can Manas be loosely translated as mind? Another question. Where exactly is the mind situated? Near the heart or the brain or neither? So yes, Manas can be translated as the mind. And the best way to explain this is actually we had covered the input process output when we had in one of the earlier satsang. I think it was probably even the introductory satsang, where we said that the sense organs, they are gatekeepers. Through the sense organs, perception happens. And once we perceive, the signal goes into, the input comes in, and the process element starts. The process element, first receiver of what comes through the sense organs, is the objective mind, manas. That element of it is manas, the objective mind. Then the objective mind processes it and sends it to the intellect. The intellect then weighs in with our own inherent tendencies and also the way we perceive things because of our not just the inherent nature, but also our experiential knowledge as well as wisdom. All that gets processed through the intellect, and then it goes to the subjective mind. And then the subjective mind, from there it goes to the karmendriyas, through which it gets perpetuated to the outside world.
So there is
So
no
that-
permanent place for the mind.
Sorry?
So there is no permanent place within our body for the mind.
You can't, I mean, every organ of the body has
Body has-
an element of the mind.
Thank
and
you.
it
Yeah.
has. Any other thought? I think during the revision sessions, we kind of went into not much of questions and interaction. And also because I took almost till 5:30, if not 5:30, but going forward, hopefully I'll finish by 5:10. And, there will be some more participation and interaction. Okay, if no more questions or thoughts or comments, I think we can sign off. One of the rare times we are signing off early, which is good. So we'll see you next week with the second satsang for chapter 7. Hari Om. Thank you.